Welcome to Good Burger Reviews. My name is John, and I'm here to review a brand new 2026 movie, and that movie is The Wrong Side of Dead, Caps Crossing. And yes, that's a long title.
Okay, what have we got?
Deep laceration in the neck.
We answered the call at Caps Crossing. It's a bloodbath.
What the hell happened out there?
They're all dead, 6 of them.
You better hope so.
This movie was released in July of 2026. It is directed by Mike Stahl. It stars Beverly D'Angelo, Sabrina Galecki, Garrett Phillips, Casey Keyes, and Gary Cooney. Basic premise: when a behavioral science major investigates the murders at Cape Crossing, she finds herself trapped in a twisted web of lies surrounding the local ranger and his son. So this movie was released straight to streaming, and this is the second week in a row that we've had come to the streaming stations pay-per-view, and I thought, all right, maybe we can get a nice basic slasher, a camp slasher, going for the summer. That's not what we got. Mostly. We're going to get into the good, the bad, and the ugly on The Wrong Side of Dead. So the first thing I'll put in the positives overall is the setting. You know, this movie takes place and they're camping. It's not really like a campground or kid campground with camp counselors. It's basically this young girl, it's her birthday, decides to take her three best friends out camping in this camping area where they have rangers lurking around as well. But this movie does give me like a movie blend. So like, I primarily obviously think of Friday the 13th and Halloween meets Portrait of a Serial Killer. I also think of movies like In a Violent Nature and The Strangers. And this is very similar to the one that I just watched last week called Kill Trip. The big difference here is, and I'll put this in the positives as well, because I do kind of like this kind of popping up in movies in this year. And it's taking a slasher format for a movie, but then also adding like a serial killer blend, like a smart serial killer blend. Not that these serial killers are smart or there aren't too many cops, but I think more of like less of a Seven, but more of the Portrait of a Serial Killer, Henry, the Portrait of a Serial Killer movie from 1986, where we kind of learn about what is going on behind a serial killer. Now, sometimes that can be good, and like we've talked about in The Strangers and the Halloween franchise, and sometimes that can be bad. But I'm going to just rip the Band-Aid off here right now. This one is another one that is a really rough watch, and unfortunately it was giving promise at first. It seemed like a step up, and still is a step up from Kill Trip, but then the movie starts making interesting turns in the plot and it starts to go downhill. So we're just going to do a spoiler review on this one, because the rest I have to say is pretty much negatives, and the way I can make this all work is by getting into the plot. Now, lucky for us, IMDb had the characters' names in here, and we have 4 girls. Amber, and like I said in Find Your Friends, why is there always an Amber in these girl group movies? Well, Amber's one of the leads, and she's the one that's having the birthday, the reason why they all go out to the woods. And there's also Sydney. Of course, why Sydney? Hello, Scream. That was kind of, I don't know, it didn't feel like a nod to Scream, because is Sydney the final girl? Yes and no, and we'll get into that. And then we have Hannah, and we have Becca. Now, Hannah and Becca are just a generic kind of, they're the first ones to go. I'll just tell you that. These characters aren't developed as much. They do each a little bit have some characteristics, but they kind of all are just throwaway fodder characters.
What are you reading? It's for my criminology class. You know, most serial killers are actually created. And if they would have caught it any earlier, then they might not have killed.
But let me start off by saying this movie opens up with an opener. I really think it's important when slashers get the opener right, and this one gets the opener wrong, because it literally feels like we're opening up in the third act. We're in a hospital, people are on gurneys, they're coming in stabbed, One guy's limping and has a cast on his arm, and it's like, oh, we've already missed all the kills. Apparently, in this camp area, there was basically a whole group of people that go dead, and someone kills them all, slasher style, but we don't get to see the end of it. And I thought, is this going to be one of those movies where we're starting off at the end and then we're going to go back to the beginning and go through it from there? And no, this is a whole other story, which I thought was strange. Why are we starting like that, as if this was the sequel, like as if this was the second movie in this franchise, which this is not a franchise. This is just a random one-timer, hopefully, movie. But it felt like the beginning of a sequel because we have a killer. They identify who the killer is right away, so there's no mystery work in this movie. We know, or at least with this killer, they do try to do a plot twist, which I don't think works, but we'll get into that.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive. But not you. Not anymore. Game over.
We're introduced to this family. So, Beverly D'Angelo, where did I know her from? I see her on the screen and I'm like, I know that girl. She's kind of old, but like I've seen her. Couldn't place her. She somewhat looked like Patricia Arquette, but I knew it wasn't Patricia Arquette. And I'm like, where have I seen this girl? And then the credits come up and I see the name played by Beverly D'Angelo. I'm like, wait a second. That's Mrs. Clark from Christmas Vacation. That's Clark's wife from Christmas Vacation. I'm like, how the hell is she like almost 40 years later in this slasher kind of playing a mom character? And I thought, wasn't she the mom in 1989? Shouldn't she be a grandmother? Like, she's still alive?
Still alive?
Well, he's not as dead as we would have hoped.
Which that brings me to the other character, which also seemed pretty old to be the parent to this younger crew of people, played by Gary Cooner, Mr. Mills or Ranger Mills. And he basically takes on a character role similar to Richard Brake's role in The Strangers Chapter 3. He's a ranger, and his son is a serial killer, and he's been helping him sweep it under the rug. And I thought, why? Why do we start with this? You know, for the last 3 years, we've been roasting The Strangers, and we come to find out in The Strangers Chapter 3 that it's a town of people who've been, you know, as long as it ain't the locals, it's all good. Now, these guys didn't have a as long as it ain't a locals deal, but this mom, she's not even his mom. I guess she's the stepmom. It's never really clear on everyone's relationship, but they are kind of like a family at this point because everyone else is dead because he's pretty much killed them all, or they've pretty much killed all the people in their family. So it starts off with all this. Like, we get all this drama before we even get our main girls brought in, right? Because they're in the hospital, and it would be like the final girl from the movie that didn't happen but did happen before this, where he kills her in the hospital bed. It was very reminiscent of a lot of the end of Scream 4 with hospital and killers running around in hospitals.
If I ever write a book one day, I'd want her to write it with me. We'd be a good team with our matching wounds and all. We're survivors now. I just wish Sydney was too.
Jill. They're not sure yet. It's still touch and go. But she's in ICU. And they think Sydney just might make it.
What?
And then it flashes to a year later. And when we get to the year later, we get to our 4 girls. Now, I don't even know who to call the final girl because technically Amber's the final girl, but she doesn't behave like a final girl. Why? Because this movie, I'll tell you the plot twist right now. This movie does the same exact thing that I Heart Willie did We also saw this in Minnie's Midnight Massacre. This girl is dating the serial killer, and she's brought all her friends out to the campground, not to celebrate her birthday, but to slaughter them and to be a part of all the killing. Now, you don't know this right away. They play it off like she's the final girl. Now, I had to rewind this because I was like, literally, it feels like when this Ranger boy, and it's a year later for him, he's the killer from the summer before, he shows up at their little campfire, and it's like they're meeting him for the first time, and they play it off like they're meeting for the first time, but we find out later that they knew each other, right? But it was like she was sweet on him right out the gate. You know, and she had told her friends, oh yeah, I am talking to a guy. This movie drags its feet before the kills happen. So I'm going to just kind of gloss over all that. But they end up separating. Well, all right, first of all, before that, they end up roasting each other. I don't understand. First of all, these friends were terrible. They reminded me of the cast in Bird Eater and Find Your Friends, where these weren't even good friends to each other. They're roasting each other. They're selfish. They're impatient. Like, they literally sit at this campfire and they do like this, you know, psycho-evaluate me, and then they roast the ever-loving crap out of each other to like almost tears. And I'm like, why are they doing this?
What the hell is wrong with her? She said it was a home invasion.
The older ranger does show up to check on them, and the younger ranger shows up to check on them. But then the younger ranger comes back. Now, when it flashes away from the girls, we're getting the young ranger fighting with his parents, Beverly D'Angelo and the older ranger. He's basically battling with them. They're fed up of cleaning up his messes. Like, so she's a nurse, so she's like over her head because she basically forged death certificates and death reasonings on paperwork for the police and all this stuff. So she's in it. He's covered up his son's crime. So they basically they're in this mess. Why are they even still here at this campground where it's like literally a playground for this kid to slaughter whoever shows up? Now, it was supposed to be an all-girls weekend. 2 of the boyfriends show up. Then we have it goes into the traditional slasher. The 2 couples, Becca and the other Hannah's boyfriends, they basically go off in their separate directions, and one couple gets slashed up pretty quickly. But this is where the plot twist happens. So when the first couple, they drive for a while, and she's being so picky about where they stop. She wanted it to be like a beautiful meadow, like you're in the woods. You're not going to find like Mary Poppins Meadow out here. You're going to get out, you're going to be in the weeds, you're going to be in the weeds. And then they end up having sex in the back of the back of the truck anyway, and they never even take their clothes off. Like, literally, they film a sex scene and it's like their clothes stay on, even though they acted like they went through the whole act, and it's like clearly they didn't do. Obviously they're making a movie, but like at least make it look, or at least film from the head up or whatever. Like, it was so ridiculous, poorly executed, right? And then the killer shows up, but like the ranger killer shows up, but then this Amber, who's like you think is the final girl, is Amber. It's her birthday. She just had told everyone that she was going to go on a jog and be gone for 2 hours. And they had been complaining like, oh, you drag us out here to leave us in this campsite for 2 hours, which, yeah, I get it. But she shows up, you think she's going to rescue her friend. No, she helps finish the job. So she's the killer. And then all of a sudden they flash this little dialogue, oh, when we met a year ago at the hospital. So she apparently Amber worked at the hospital where we saw the opening scene at, and that's where they met, and they'd been in contact all this time, and they had pre-planned this whole mess. Yes, the kills are terrible. They're poorly executed. It's a lot of just stabs. The first person who gets stabbed, like, he doesn't even bleed right away. It's like they had to cut and then cut back. Typical for lower budget, but like just poor execution on the kills. So like, this movie was going along okay. The acting was a lot better than what I've been seeing recently for these straight-to-streamers. So I was having hope for this one. But then as soon as the kills started happening, we get the plot twist, it just was terrible. So And then the characters are doing dumb things. It's not making sense. The daytime scenes were super short. It's like it was like this happened over 3 or 4 days. But like, there's too much time that went on where like it was daytime, then it was nighttime. And I think this was probably an issue because when they filmed or how they filmed it, they probably didn't schedule the film properly. But either way, it just never made sense on like what did they do for like, and no one ever ate. Like there was one scene where they found a granola bar and I thought, come on, some of this basic stuff can make sense. You know, one of the big things that didn't make sense was they could never get reception, except for when the plot needed them to get reception, because these two serial killers, the girl and the boy, they are talking through text and phone, but then all the other characters, they can't call the police, they can't call anyone else, they can never have reception. Now they try to answer why this ranger's carrying like this like look like a Wi-Fi box maybe. I don't know. It just didn't make sense. But the movie comes to a climax by being too complicated and trying to make these killers feel sympathetic too. So like, you have this young girl and this young boy, and we go into their whole past. There's flashback scenes about them, you know, being in foster care, being abused, having a rough come of it, and they come up and they basically turn into serial killers. But they kind of, this is like what we said in The Strangers and in Halloween, when you dive too much into the past about these killers, it takes away the scariness because you start becoming sympathetic with them. You start feeling like, oh, you know, they're raising, their parents abused them, and now look, they're you know, they're killing animals, and then they're killing people, and you get sympathetic with them. And like, this does not work for me in horror movies. It just takes away the scare. And then in this movie, it just becomes dramatic and complicated. You know, I would just love to see a slasher executed, you know, a basic slasher executed. You know, I get it, you know, it's not going to be 100% original, but sometimes these basic slashers is what we want. You know, a basic burger, a good burger slasher. But this movie just falls apart by being too complicated and not making sense. And the characters making dumb decisions. Now, the Sydney girl was fun. Now, once we realize that Amber is bad, then it shifts over to Sydney being the final girl, or we think. But no, these guys, Sydney makes it the longest, but they kill everyone. Not only do they kill all the girls and their boyfriends, they kill Beverly, they end up killing Beverly D'Angelo, they end up killing the older ranger guy, and then Amber ends up killing this kid, the ranger kid. I can't remember his name, but you know, he was the star. He was originally the solo killer who then had his girlfriend killer with him. And
everybody dies. And that's life.
They do this little scene where like she's calling the police, and she's got it set up where she's pinned it all on him. And if the cops, and they don't show any of this, but like based on the final conversation of her reporting it to the police, she's gonna get away with it. Everyone's gonna blame the kid that she just killed. The end. So we're gonna get down to business on this one, because it's no surprise this one was a spam. A step up from some of these other spams that I've just recently reviewed, but nonetheless still a spam. You know, it comes down to execution. I'll say this time in and time again. Just because you have a low budget does not mean that you have to be poorly executed, because I will forgive a budget. You know, I just watched Haunted Heist, where, you know, lower budget movie, they used a lot of CGI. Overall, I was entertained for what it was. I could look past that. But like this movie, they just make too many dumb mistakes, too many plot holes, too much stupidity. This is Johnny with Good Burgers. Please like, subscribe, tap that notification bell, all that jazz, and don't forget to stay scared of serial killers and their surprise girlfriends in the woods.